What's up, guys? Hope y'all are having a great day today, just full of so much positivity and happiness, dude, because today we are going to be talking about the latest, greatest new game coming out of China, and that, of course, is Black Myth Wukong.
天上太阳红呀红彤彤哎，心中的太阳是毛泽东哎，他领导我们的解放哎，正义翻身当家做主人，咿呀咿自由呀呀自由啊，正义翻身当家做主人。
Now, in going into Black Myth Wukong's, I was not exactly excited about this game leading up to launch. Originally, when they showed it off, it looked like another Souls clone to me, which typically I'm not really interested in. I like the actual From Software Souls games like Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and Elden Ring. All of those are fine. I have never been a fan of Souls copycat style games, so automatically I kind of wrote it off, and I did the same thing with another game called Stellar Blade. Well, you know, rewind time a little bit, and I kind of had to eat my words on Stellar Blade. I originally thought it was going to be a Souls clone when I played the demo of the game, but come to find out it was not actually the case, so I decided I would go ahead and give the Monkey Man game a chance and see what it was like for myself when the game actually released. And leading up to release, there was a lot of people saying that this does not really play like a Souls game at all in their review, so I was like, alright, cool, we may have another Stellar Blade situation on our hands. So I went in with an open mind, and at first I was really enjoying the game, in all honesty. You know, I was kind of going through the bosses, not really having too much trouble. It didn't feel super sweaty or anything like that. It felt like a more relaxed action style game akin to Stellar Blade, like I mentioned earlier. But once I got about halfway through chapter 1 and into chapter 2, that changed very dramatically, very quickly, and I guess the skill check phase of the game came into full swing, and this became basically yet another Souls clone. Now, I just want to say this up front, okay? I am not saying this is a bad game. Overall, mechanically, the game is actually really well done, especially considering that this is the studio's first attempt at a game of this scale and in this genre. So, you know, round of applause for the devs. This is actually a very good first attempt game, all things considered. The problem I have with it is it's just not for me, and it's not my type of game. It's not the type of game I enjoy, and that is perfectly fine if you enjoy it, because I'm not saying the game itself is bad. It definitely has its problems, which we'll get into, but let me say it again for the motherfuckers in the back who don't have two brain cells to rub together. I am not saying this is a bad game. In fact, it's a very good game for what it's trying to be. I am just not a fan of this style of game, and it does not appeal to me personally. If you like it, that is absolutely wonderful. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Trust me, I wish I could be in the same boat with you, but maybe it's just because I'm burnt out on this genre, or maybe it's just because I'm an old motherfucker at this point. I just do not have the motivation to play this type of game if I am not having fun with it. And in the case of Black Myth Wukong, I was not having fun with it. So now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and break down some of these negatives that I have with the game. We'll get into the positives later on in the video, but you know, on YouTube, negativity sells, so gotta cash that check. But here's one I think we can all agree on, okay? This is not gonna be too crazy, trust me. I don't think I'm gonna get canceled for saying this, but in 2024, the fact that this game does not have any sort of like local map or way to find where you are in the environment, or any sort of indicators or HUD elements or anything, is very annoying, because this game is not exactly, let's just say, diverse in its environmental details, all right? It's very, very generic in a lot of the ways that the environments are crafted, and you'll run into a very common issue of where it looks like you'd be able to jump on top of something or go up like a slope or a hill or go explore, but in reality, it's just an invisible wall that prevents you from progressing. So in these instances, it's very easy to get turned around and not really remember where you are, because everything pretty much looks the same, and there's not really any sort of indicator of how to get back to the nearest shrine. In fact, I found a lot of cases it was just easier to die and then respawn back at the shrine you were last at if you got mixed up on where you exactly were inside of the environment, because there's no actual penalty on death in this game, which I do actually like, but we'll talk about that when we get to the positives. But yeah, it's just kind of obnoxious. Like, there's no reason this game doesn't have a map. It doesn't add to the immersion like they tried to claim with Starfield, bro. Like, come on. Less games need to be taking Starfield's advice when it comes to design elements. So the lack of a map in this game, I think, is a massive detriment to the experience and would have been a very easy thing to add to just overall improve the quality of life experience with it. So like I said, there's some genuine problems with this game that I have, not just the, ooh, it's too hard, dude, which I'm sure I'm going to get in the comments anyway, but whatever. So let me just go ahead and say this too. The camera in this game is absolutely abysmal. And it's not just the camera, it's also the lock-on system as well, because a lot of the gimmicks in this game in the boss fights have to do with the boss like teleporting around the arena suddenly, and you have like a split second to react before they just absolutely decimate your health bar. So that's very irritating, because already the camera is kind of all over the place. If you get stuck in a corner, it's basically game over, man. You cannot see anything that's going on. And on top of that, there are several enemies, the tiger boss being one, that has like this teleportation ability where he turns into a stone statue, and up to that point in the boss fight, he breaks out of the stone statue in like an actual animation, but at one point it switches to where the stone statue remains, and then he flies at you from across the arena in a completely random direction. But the problem is, if you have your lock-on him, it doesn't auto-acquire him when he reappears, so literally you have no idea where the hell he's going to be coming from. And there's several bosses that I've experienced that have a similar circumstance where you're just like, okay, what the fuck was I supposed to do there? I couldn't see where it was coming from. Like, it's just basically, it feels cheap, and it's irritating, it's frustrating, and it pisses you off. It makes you not want to play, because it's not like a skill issue. It's an issue of not even knowing what you're supposed to be reacting to and when. So you can't get good if you literally can't see something coming at you in the first place. So I think that's a massive problem. Also, at random times in the boss encounters, the lock-on system will just drop the boss for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It really just is jank, okay? Like, I can excuse that a little bit. Again, this is their first attempt with the genre, but it is irritating if you're gonna have a game this difficult and the camera is that annoying. You know, From Software had to go through their learning pains on that particular problem. So again, I will extend a little bit of, I guess, charity in this particular instance on this topic, but nonetheless, it does make for a very irritating experience, especially considering just how difficult and long a lot of these boss fights are. Which brings me to my next point, and that is the general length of the main boss fights in this game. And this isn't necessarily just an issue with Black Myth Wukong, it's a problem with the entire Souls-like genre, including From Software's own games, especially in Elden Ring, which it's just the boss fights are way too long nowadays. Because if you look at the original like Dark Souls style boss fights from back in the day, they were like a few minutes long at most. You were maybe dodging like 3 to 4, maybe 5 hit combos. Then you would get your chance to have your opening to go and attack, and you would repeat the process for a few minutes using your prior knowledge that you obtained from your previous attempts to actually defeat the boss. Nowadays, it's not only that, but it's like this war of attrition or a test of stamina, where not only do you have to memorize every single potential move that the boss does to a greater degree, because they're throwing 20 hit combos at you in some cases, but they have so much health that it takes sometimes 5 to even 10 minutes to beat some of these bosses, which is just not fun, especially if you're having to do the same boss over and over and over again, because it makes that process of learning the boss even more frustrating, that you have to basically sit through 5+ minutes and then get your your ass kicked eventually, only to have to do it over and over again. So I think the formula has been messed up somewhere along the line, and they're missing the plot on what made these boss fights really rewarding in the first place. It wasn't just difficulty for the sake of difficulty. It was difficulty in the sense that you had a lack of knowledge. And I think that's the biggest issue for me, is like Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 are not hard games if you know how to play them. And this is a hard game even if you know how to play it. So that's, I think, the issue I have with this is it's difficulty for the sake of difficulty, and it's not rewarding like the old Dark Souls formula used to be. And I think that's where my disconnect mainly comes from. And I've been feeling that way for a very long time on this particular genre, and it could just be I'm getting burnt out on it, and I'm getting older, and after working 8+ hours a day, going to the gym, walking my dog for 2 hours a night, and I sit down and play video games, I don't exactly just want to beat my head against a wall until I eventually get good. So maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just talking out of my ass, but that's how it feels to me. I feel like we've lost the plot somewhere along the line, and instead of having like these more simplistic bosses that actually test your knowledge of them, instead we're getting these endurance tests where basically it's whether or not you can hit the perfect button prompts for 5 to 10 minutes in order to slowly whittle down the boss's health bar, which I'm just personally not a fan of. And again, it may just be me. Maybe I'm completely off base, and maybe it's just old man yelling at the clouds, but that's just how I feel playing these games, and I never felt that way playing the older Dark Souls games. And even Dark Souls 3, I went back and played a little bit recently before the Elden Ring DLC came out, and I was not feeling that way either. Like, I don't know. I feel like the plot has been lost somewhere along the line, and instead of just making bosses that are difficult due to the lack of player knowledge, we're just basically making torture porn in boss format. But hey, you know, there's obviously a market for that. People like this game, and people like games like it. So I'm not taking anything away from it. All I can say is it is not for me, which brings me to another complaint that I have, and this is especially related to boss fights, but you have these special abilities in the game, which I actually do like the special abilities overall. I think they're really cool, but an issue with them is in boss fights, you can't use them when you want to. You have to wait until very specific windows appear in order to use a certain ability on certain bosses, which I'm not really a fan of. And this is particularly prevalent in the like freeze time ability, where you're supposed to be able to freeze an enemy in place and able to get some hits off on them, or maybe heal if you need to. It basically gives you a pause in combat, so either you can deal some additional damage or use some items or whatever you need to do. But the problem is certain bosses will just like instantaneously counter it. It doesn't matter what they're doing. They could be mid combo, they could be mid attack, they could be doing anything. They will immediately counter it. They will just completely shut off their combo, shut down their swing, whatever it might be, and immediately block it, completely nullifying that ability, which is a massive just basically kick in the balls when you're doing these boss fights. And it's very irritating because there's no way for you to cancel out their abilities, but they can immediately stop everything they're doing, including animation cancel, and block out yours. So that was absolutely infuriating at times, and it just added to the fact that you just basically have to sit there and wait and wait and wait and dodge and dodge and dodge until you finally get your opening, and then maybe you can actually do what you want to do and fight back. So it just adds to this feeling of like prolonged boss fights that are just not rewarding. Now, this isn't a thing in every boss fight, but the more major bosses can cancel out all of your abilities basically immediately, which I'm not a fan of it, especially when these abilities have cooldown timers, which can dramatically change the flow of your experience in that boss fight. So the way I look at it is, if you have the ability, you should be able to use it whenever the fuck you want. Like, a boss should not be able to fucking animation cancel out of a 10-hit combo and decide, yep, I'm going to use this specific ability that counters your freeze ability. And it's just irritating. I don't know. It feels cheap. It's another thing that just feels unfair. Like, the bosses already are overwhelmingly more powerful than you, and it's just another kick in the balls that makes you feel like you're even more cucked in that particular situation. But I think that's the majority of my negatives for the most part. Really, like, I'm not too negative on this game. I just can identify it's not for me. But everything else I liked. Like, I think the story, from what I saw, now keep in mind, I know nothing about Chinese mythology, but from what I glimpsed, I actually have somewhat of an interest in going and researching Chinese mythology now, because it kind of looks badass, I'm not gonna lie. Like, the story that's there is actually pretty cool, man. Like, I'm actually intrigued. I think it's interesting. The opening scene of the game game is fucking awesome and gives you a glimpse at what this game could possibly be maybe later on down the line, but right now, holy shit, is it sweaty. So it just, maybe that's the reason why too, is like at the beginning of the game, it doesn't feel like it does when you get to the point in chapter 2 that I'm at. It just feels like more of a fun action game, kind of aligned with Stellar Blade, for example. And the point I'm at in the game right now just feels like an ultra sweaty Souls game. And I mean, maybe now that I think about it, that's why it's so polarizing. You start off at like this incredible high, and then you just crash down back to reality and you feel super underpowered. So maybe that's what it is too, but you can glimpse that this game could actually be really fun, I think, if it was just more of an action game, less of a Souls game. But going back to the story, I mean, I know nothing about the plot, so keep that in mind. But from what I've seen, it's interesting. I think the character designs are really cool. I think for the most part, the environments are well done. They all look distinct, but within each like specific environment, it's very generic. So you can tell the budget was not put towards the actual environment of the game, which I think is fine. You know, you could tell this is a first attempt game. It's not an infinite budget AAA game, which again, perfectly okay. I think we need more games like that. So the gameplay is obviously the main focus, but the story that is there, and I guess the surrounding lore, is interesting enough for me to want to do some independent research. So I think that is a great sign, and it's definitely not Dark Souls style storytelling. Thank God. It actually seems to have a legitimate story, so that is great if you ask me. The soundtrack is fine for what it is. It's not anything super memorable. Definitely has the Chinese influence to it at times, but yeah, it's okay. It's serviceable. Not really a big deal. I think graphically it looks great. I was playing it on PlayStation 5. I didn't have any sort of performance issues during my time playing it that I noticed. Everything looked good. You do kind of get that weird kind of effect where like the edges of objects kind of pixelate, or I guess turn into like little particles, which is pretty prominent in a lot of Unreal Engine games, I think it is. But yeah, that's nothing new. And again, this is not one of those infinite budget AAA games, so I'm not going to hold that against them either. But I think the game looks and runs very well on console, to say the least. I think they did a good job with that. I actually bought this game on console because they didn't send out review copies for the PlayStation version, so there was that speculation that the game was going to run like absolute shit, so I figured I would buy that version so I could warn people if that was the case, you know, just in case we had another Cyberpunk 2077 situation on our hands. But luckily that is not the case, and I do not have to report the bad news. In fact, the console version of this game runs very well. I have heard the PC version is kind of a mess technically, which is kind of par for the course, unfortunately, for modern PC ports. But yeah, the console version for the most part runs very well, and I don't really have any sort of complaints on that front. And I will say, like, the gameplay of this game, I know I bitched a lot about the boss fights and everything like that, but overall, I do really like the gameplay in this. I think the animations look awesome. The different abilities you have access to are amazing. I love the fact that when you die, you don't have to go pick up your souls or the equivalent or whatever. Like, all that progression just carries with you. I think that's a nice quality of life improvement, personally. It makes, I guess, grinding a lot better. And also, you know, in the case of this game, since you don't have the map, if you get lost, you can always just have an enemy kill you, and then you teleport to the place you were resting at last. So I guess that's a nice kind of get out of jail free card, since there's no real navigation assistance in this game whatsoever. So if you ever get turned around, it's easier just to die than stumble around the environment for an hour or two. So I think that's definitely good. I like that aspect of the game, but I think the core gameplay mechanics are phenomenally well done, man. And that's kind of why I'm torn on this, because I really do want to like it. Like, I can see myself maybe in a different life, a younger me, someone with more free time they're looking to fill. I actually could see myself really enjoying this game potentially, or maybe, dare I say it, if it had an easy mode. Yeah, now I'm gonna get fucking lynched. But anyway, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I can see why people like this. I get it. I completely understand. Just as things sit right now, it's not for me. I mean, maybe I'll give this another few shots or whatever, but I don't really see it changing much, in all honesty, because like maybe I get past a boss I'm stuck on, and then I get to another boss and I'm in the exact same scenario, and it's like, do I really want to keep doing that over and over again with the limited free time I have every single night to play video games? And the answer most likely is no, especially considering all of the games we have coming out in the next few weeks, like Visions of Mana, Space Marine 2, which looks absolutely fucking awesome, man. I cannot wait to get that game. You know, games like Astrobot, you know, fun, just kind of like short burst games you can pick up and play for a few hours course every night and just have a good time. I mean, that's kind of the point in life I'm at right now. And again, maybe in a different life, at a different time in my life, whatever, I could really enjoy Black Myth Wukong. But as things sit right now, for me personally, I'm just not having fun with it, and I'm not motivated to actually finish the game. I mean, again, I'll probably give this a few more shots. I mean, I already paid for the game, so I might as well play more of it, you know, until something else comes out that I'm going to cover. But yeah, let me know in the comment section your thoughts on Black Myth Wukong. Are you enjoying it or not? I would say overall, if I had to give this game a rating, I would say that it's like a 7, which on my scale, a 7 is like a great. So 5 is average, 6 is good, 7 is great. I think for what it is, it's a very, very solid game. In this particular instance, it's just not for me. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Hit that like button if you made it this far. I'm sure this video is going to get absolutely bombarded with dislikes. I don't really care. Thank you for your engagement. It helps me recoup the cost of the game. But anyway, guys, with that shit said, I want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to check out this video and for all the recent support. You guys are the fucking best, and I really do appreciate it. And with that said, I will catch you guys next time. Oh, and if you're looking for a fun action game, go play Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, or Stellar Blade instead. You will not regret it.